As a small business, particularly a handcrafted or manufacturing small business, records and inventory management are everything. We have to worry about things like expenses and pricing and orders and recipes, raw material inventory, finished goods inventory, and inventory valuation being probably among the most difficult. Fortunately, there is an application that can help with all of this. Hi everyone, and welcome to the channel. My name is Wade with Black Tie Barn. If this is your first time here, we discuss candle making, running a business, and more. If that interests you at all, and you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe below and also click that bell button to turn on notifications for future videos. And please give this video a quick thumbs up below so that YouTube knows that you enjoy the content on this channel. So many of you know I have used Craftybase for several years now. I have mentioned it in many videos, and I've even done a previous older video on using this software. I have been singing its graces for quite some time now. It's really tough to imagine trying to run my business without using it. Well, today I'm excited to announce that I have partnered up with Craftybase to help bring you more content specifically related to using Craftybase in your business. Craftybase has recently become a sponsor of the channel and in fact are sponsoring this video. That means more routine videos covering various aspects of using Craftybase, and I'll actually be creating a designated playlist diving into all sorts of different features, how-tos, tips and tricks, use cases, and so on. And this is the first of those videos. If you are interested in following along, a link to Craftybase is in the description below, and that link below will take you straight to the landing page, which we will be referencing here shortly. Also, using that affiliate link below will not cost you anything more than using any other link to Craftybase, even if you decide to sign up. But it does help the channel, and it does let Craftybase know that you all are seeing and enjoying and engaging with the videos on this topic. Also, I want to stress that I would not be partnering up with Craftybase in this way if I did not use and love the software myself. I think most of you know that by now, as you see me using it when I'm making products all the time in my videos. This really is a win-win though for all involved as Craftybase continues to get their product in front of more viewers and handcrafters, actually the very same people that the software was created for and intended to help. But this also serves as a tutorial platform now for anyone using Craftybase or looking to start using Craftybase. Yes, you can find snips and clips of help out there online, but this channel will be covering real use cases and walkthroughs of how to use Craftybase in detail. In real life, real business situations, because I use it the same way that you all would use it. Now, many of you have been asking for this for quite some time, and I'm happy to announce that the time has finally come. So a big shout out and thank you to Craftybase for working with me to make this possible. So I did think about asking, who is this video for? Who would Craftybase benefit? But that would be a long list. So it's much simpler to ask, who is it not for? Really, those that don't have any inventory whatsoever to handle. Yep, that's pretty much about it. So the remainder of this video is to tell you more about what Craftybase is, what it can do for you, and why it's so beneficial. Then we'll do a quick walkthrough of their main website, how to sign up and get started. Next, I will highlight the major areas and features inside of that new Craftybase account that we set up. And then lastly, I will leave you with some tips to get started. Now, as I mentioned before, this is the first video of many. It is meant to get you familiar with Craftybase and how to get started. But keep in mind, there will be several how-tos and tutorials coming soon. So what is Craftybase? Well, Craftybase is primarily an inventory management system, plus much more. It helps you track your inventory on a perpetual basis. It is a good idea to periodically still do inventory counts as just a best practice, but Craftybase is perpetual, meaning it's updating constantly as you go. That makes it more current and reliable. You're not only having reliable counts anytime you actually count your stock, you have it on an ongoing basis. Also, it uses the weighted average method for inventory valuation. If this is new to you, I will be doing several videos on calculating cost of goods and doing bookkeeping for a candle business down the road. And that is how you track your cost of goods sold. Again, more videos on this down the road. Important note here is that Craftybase inventory value is not static. It's always updating, so you're getting accurate information and reliable information all of the time. It gives you real insight into your inventory, your cost of goods, your stock counts, and so on. And while it does have many bookkeeping and accounting features, it's not actually meant to be a full accounting solution. Yes, it can track expenses and your orders and your inventory, your cost of goods, which by the way are the four most challenging factors for a small business. but it isn't meant to track your assets or be a complete set of accounting books, so to speak. Now, I am not an accountant or a bookkeeper, so I would advise that you speak with yours if you already have one, or find one to ask for a little bit of guidance on this, because there are different opinions and different ways that you can handle inventory as a small business. So definitely check with someone for yourself if you do have any questions or concerns. But most of us fall into one of two categories. We either, one, do our bookkeeping ourselves and then we turn everything over to our accountant to file the taxes at the end of year for us. Or two, we have a bookkeeper who handles everything throughout the year and then of course also files our taxes for us as well. So if you are in category one and you do this yourself, then I would recommend using Craftybase as a supplement to a full accounting solution, something like QuickBooks, for example. But if you fall into category number two and have a bookkeeper or plan to get a bookkeeper for you, then you really don't have to worry about the accounting part of it at all. Just use Craftybase to help with your business operations, help with your inventory, help manage your orders coming in, your recipes and your materials, and give you price guidance, things like that. And then you can simply run reports for your bookkeeper or accountant whenever they ask. Or you can actually grant them access to your Craftybase account, just like most accounting softwares, but more on that later. So when we're talking about inventory and inventory valuations, most manufacturing companies' major focus is inventory management. It's very costly and very time consuming. The benefit of Craftybase is it's geared and priced for small businesses. It's also not going to break the bank like most inventory accounting systems do. This one is specifically designed for small handcrafted businesses like ours. Now, in my opinion, inventory systems that don't provide constant insight into your operations like inventory, cost of goods, your margins, and so on, and also help come tax time, they're not worth the money. There are others out there that claim to be inventory systems for handcrafters, and I won't name them here, but they're just very basic. They help with recipes, they help with final product inventory, but are of no real help when it comes to dynamically updating your inventory, your count, the value, tracking your cost of goods, and so on. None of them are as powerful, none of them are as feature-rich or as beneficial as Craftybase. Trust me, I've tried them all and I continue to use Craftybase. So after you click the link below in the description, it should just take you to a landing page for craftybase.com. And this is what it's going to look like, at least at the time of shooting this video. Now, granted, with everything that we're going to show you today, just bear in mind that things could change over time, right? The look of the layout a little bit, some of the features they add, pricing, things like that can always change a little bit over time. So I don't want to get too specific on some of those nitty-gritty details as much as I want to just talk about the overall process and feature sets and things that Craftybase can do for you and how to get started. Once you reach the Craftybase main page, if you're interested in just diving right in, you can always click on the right side at Try Us for free, or this blue button right here that says Start Your 14-Day Trial, or Start Your 14-Day Free Trial. Now that will give you complete access to the software for 14 days for free. But if you are interested in a few more details, let's start kind of from the top here. If we click on features, we're just going to talk about some of the main things that Craftybase can do for you. And again, I mentioned these earlier, and in a previous video, I dove into some of them as well. But price guidance is an interesting little benefit, especially for those that are getting started and trying to get an idea of how to price their products. And the way that Craftybase does it is it takes everything that you've told it about your product. That can be the cost to make your product, your time and labor, anything that you want to track, your markup, anything, and it will give you and spit out some good pricing guidance both at wholesale, retail, and so on. So it's just a nice little benefit. And again, there'll be future videos diving into this, and we'll see it a little bit more detail later on. Of course, it does track your cost of goods sold. This is the main purpose of a system that tracks inventory, is not only knowing the value of your inventory, but how that value turns into cost of goods sold. This is how the IRS wants companies tracking their inventory and expensing their materials. There's a lot of misinformation out there about how you write off expenses for small businesses that use your materials in manufacturing or making products. You don't treat them like a typical expense. If you buy office supplies or things like that, then you can typically just write those off as an expense. But when it comes to materials that get used in the production of a product, that is different. Those are not expensed at the time of purchase. They are expensed as the item is sold. That is why it's called the cost of goods sold. Without a good system like Craftybase to track that, it is very, very difficult to accurately track your cost of goods sold. So again, I don't want to get in a ton of detail on why that's important and how it's done. More so just wanted to let you know that that is one of the driving forces behind Craftybase. They also will help you with compliance and traceability. This is more so for handcrafters that are making soap and bath and body products, but it is worth mentioning that it helps you do material tracing reports. Product and order management. And so it's not just about tracking inventory and materials, but also your products, your finished goods, and then orders. So you can manually add orders to Craftybase, and you can integrate with some of your major platforms to import your orders in. And so Craftybase can help tackle that issue as well. And then general expense tracking. So expenses in Craftybase are not just your typical expenses like I was talking about with rent and utilities and office supplies, but this is also the way your materials that you use in making your products get added into Craftybase. You don't just add them manually. You want those materials attached to a dollar amount, to an actual cost, right? And so you add those with expense tracking. And again, I'll be saying this repeatedly throughout this video, but I will have dedicated videos on every aspect of Craftybase and real life situations and use cases. But just going through the features right now, expense tracking is obviously one that Craftybase will offer. Materials and components. We'll talk about this here in a minute a little bit more, but it does track all your raw materials that we just talked about. And then, of course, what good is any system these days without some type of reporting? Craftybase does come with a good slew of report options that help you not with just insight into your business operations, but also in terms of bookkeeping, accounting, and helping around tax time. If you are someone that does consignment along with wholesale, so you have products sitting on the shelves at other retailers that you need to track inventory for, then they do have a module for adding consignment. Stock taking is just a way of tracking all of your products and your raw materials, but you can also do it by bin and lot number, and that is another kind of neat feature to help you organize your raw materials and your finished goods. So those are just kind of a quick highlight of the main features that Craftybase offers. But real quick, let's take a look at the integrations, and not going into detail of each of these. I just want to show you that if you use any of these platforms, that they will integrate with Craftybase. Now, the way they integrate is a little bit different for each. The way orders are imported depends more on the platform than it does on Craftybase. For example, the way Square and Shopify treat order fees and processing fees is a little bit different. And so the way those get imported into Craftybase is naturally going to be a little bit different. So just know that depending on your integration, it could be a little different. And so hopefully future videos will help clarify that if anyone is struggling with it. So when it comes to pricing, they have multiple options. There's yearly options, monthly options, but just like with most software, it just depends on what you need here. Going from left to right, you go from your more basic up to your more advanced. And you can see if we scroll down to the features here that all of them are going to include unlimited orders, materials, and products, and at least one user account. And then you can kind of see what else you need. And they also obviously all include stock taking, expense reporting, and some basic reports, and at least one integrated sales channel. Then you could see across the others, what else do you might need? Do you need multiple sales channels? Do you need multiple user accounts if you're a small business with several hands in the cookie jar, so to speak? Do you need to track consignment and material lot and bin tracking, things like that? So depending on what you need, you may choose the most appropriate one for you. And again, I don't want to spend too much time talking specifically on price because pricing is always subject to change. Over time, products pricing can change. So I don't want to make this video look not as relevant a year from now if something changes. I want this video to be an introduction to Craftybase, how it can help you, and an overview of the features more so than anything. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and start our free trial. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I think most people these days know how to get an account set up, but you just click on Try Craftybase. You're going to put in your name. So I'll put in Wade Demo, and we'll put in demo at blacktypebarn.com, for example. I'm just going to set whatever password, and then I would hit Start My Craftybase Trial. It tells you down here that when your trial will end, and then of course you can decide what plan you would like to go with from that point. What's important to note here is you do not need any kind of credit card to start this, to try this out. A lot of software is put in your credit card and then we'll bill you as soon as your trial ends. It's not how Craftybase works. They give you free, uninhibited access to their software to use. And then if you choose to keep it and you like it, At that point, you can worry about an actual paid plan. And once you sign up and log in, you'll have to verify your email, of course. And once you log in for the first time, you're going to see some basic pointers and tips that pop up. So this is saying, hello, welcome to Craftybase, the only bookkeeping software designed specifically for small businesses that make their own products. Couldn't agree more. This is just one of 8 tips, as you can see here. We're not going to go through all these at the moment, but it just explains to you some of the things I talked about in the introduction. And it just gives you a basic explanation of how Craftybase works and how it can help you. So we're going to get through all these prompts, and then it lands on your default landing page. Now this is your main page for Craftybase, your dashboard, so to speak. So we obviously are starting from scratch. We have no materials, no products, no orders, nothing. It does come with a default list of some basic expense categories you can use, but we'll talk about those later. As you, of course, use the software more, it will start to populate. So across the top, there are a few tabs that we need to talk about real quickly. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I will be doing other videos on how each of these tabs works in detail and helping you along the way in a very detailed process and workflow, and how I use it myself, bunch of tips and tricks, things like that. But for now, I just want to highlight the tabs and what they are for, because I don't want each one of these videos to be extremely long and throwing too much at you at one time. So as an introduction, these tabs across the top is, of course, your products. These are your finished goods ready to sell. And of course, Craftybase is going to tell you a little bit about that here. You can import them if you have them created elsewhere. What I like to do personally is create my products in Craftybase, and then after they're imported, I match them together. But I want Craftybase to be my sole source of record, so to speak. Everything is created here, and then I match it to all the other platforms if I need to. You can break up your products into different categories. So if, for example, if we switch back over to a live site, if I click on products here, categories, you can see all these different categories. Now this isn't a current site I'm using at the moment. This is just kind of an old one that I played around with a long time as a demo account. So it's not entirely accurate, but you can see all these different ways that you can categorize your orders or your products. Then you can also check kind of what kind of state they're in, if they're active or archived, and so on. And we will walk through adding products and materials and orders in future videos. Your products are made of materials. So I'm going to skip components for just a sec, but products are made of materials. And this is where the nuts and the bolts of how Craftybase works. You're going to create all your materials that you use in creating products will be listed here. Your waxes, your oils, your soap bases, your wicks, your jars, your packaging, anything that goes into your finished products will be listed here as separate materials. So once again, we'll flip back over. If I click on materials in this other account, you'll see all these different categories that I've created. So we'll click on waxes and bases, and it will filter that out by all my different waxes and additives. But let's say I just want to see all my wicks. I can filter that out as well. And you don't want to know how many oils I have. But that is basically what materials are. Anything that's going to be going into your finished product. Now, these will be generated from purchases you make with your vendors, your suppliers, which will actually be in the expense section. We'll talk about that later. But the components one is really kind of a combination of a material and a product. When you take your materials and create a product, that becomes a finished product. But there are some cases where you might mix a couple materials together that make part of a finished product, and that is what is called a component. I don't really run into this much with candle making, but you will see it with other handcrafted goods like jewelry, or if you're making leather watches or belts, you might take a particular type of dye for a leather and a leather material, and you might combine those together to make a certain shade of a leather and a certain length of a strap. That might be a component that then later goes into a finished product of a certain kind of belt. Another example the Craftybase gives is if you're baking and you're making buttercream, and that is where you're mixing a couple materials together to create buttercream, and then buttercream becomes a component part of another product, like a cake. So again, it's not something I actually use very often, but in certain industries, it could be very powerful. You can directly add materials here if you would like to, but I do it on the fly as needed, and I do it when I'm creating expenses. The only time I would really ever add a material directly, not tied to an expense, is if I am backdating a material or adding material as some kind of adjustment, something that I already have in stock but I don't have a record for. but I still need to use in my recipes. So speaking of recipes, once you have a finished or created product, you can then build a recipe based off of those materials that you have available. And that is another really powerful part of Craftybase. Every recipe, every product I make has an associated recipe, and many of you have probably seen me using those in some of my candle making videos. Now, to show you an example of that, let me go back into this old demo account, and I'm going to choose, let's choose a Harvest Moon candle. So I've got a Harvest Moon 6-ounce mason candle here, right? So here's the product itself. I have created this product, and we'll talk about all the other details some other time, but if you scroll down, you can see that you can create a recipe. So to make one Harvest Moon candle, or in my case, I do batches of 8 of this jar this size. So I would tell this recipe to make 8 of these items. This is what I need. I've got 8 mason jars, 8 lids, 8 wick stickers, 49 ounces of this particular wax, 4.7 ounces of the fragrance oil, if I'm using UV inhibitor, 8 of the wicks that I choose, and even how much dye. If I'm tracking labor, you can include that as well. But you've built out the recipe. Now, if I'm going to make a batch of this Harvest Moon candle, I just simply pull up this recipe and I can print it off, and it tells me exactly what I need of every one of my materials. This is probably my favorite part of Craftybase, just because it's so dynamic, and it helps track all of your inventory and all your materials and your products and your cost of goods, all while giving the benefit of just having a simple recipe. And you can see it even shows you material cost per item in your recipe. So it's very nice. Then it will tally all up and tell you this is how much it cost you based off your materials to make that one candle. In this case, it's saying it cost me $2.41 to make one. And so it, and then it gives you some recommended price guidance over here. So it's recommending for a basic retail markup that I sell it for around $9.66. Then it even gives you some wholesale recommended price guidance. And then you can do some friends and family ones or any other custom profiles you want, which is really, really nice feature. So that is how products work, and it uses the recipes based off of the materials in your materials section. So we talked about materials and how do you get those materials into Craftybase. Well, you do that through an expense. So I'm going to be doing this as one of my first other videos coming soon, but to add an expense, let's say you purchased some materials from candle supplier ABC. That could be Candle Signs, Flaming Candle, Lone Star, Nature's Garden, you name it. Any candle supplier that you buy anything from, you would simply go to Add Expense, the purchase date, the receipt or invoice number. You could type in, whatever vendor you used, and then you just pull up your order, your receipt, your invoice from that company, and just start adding all your items. And Craftybase will walk you through this, but I will be giving more detail in future videos. But it will just walk you through adding your order right into Craftybase, and then when you're all done, all of those materials will now show up in your materials section. Those materials are now available for you to use in stock to create your final products. Once you have final products, this is when you would see your order section. So you can add orders manually right into Craftybase, and I'll do that for like cash transactions or in-person transactions, things that are not tied to a specific platform that I use, like Shopify or anything like that. But as I mentioned earlier, you can also integrate into your selling platforms and import your orders in. So once those orders come in, you mark them as paid or shipped if necessary, and then that will then deduct your finished product from your available stock, which also deducted the cost of those materials when you made the product. So everything is being tracked. And so when you made your product, it deducted your materials, your raw materials. And then when you sold your product, that deducted your finished good materials. But there's no confusion now that you don't have to track how much of that inventory is available or has been used or consumed. It is all done by Craftybase, including how much value, inventory cost was tied to those raw materials and was tied to that finished product. So that step I just mentioned about making a product, that is what this manufacturer tab is for. So earlier I talked about creating a product and creating a recipe for that product. Now it's time to make that product. Now I showed you an example of making 8 of those Harvest Moon candles. In that case, so you go to Craftybase in the manufacturer section and you say, I'm going to add a manufacturer. And that, in other words, I'm going to make a batch of candles. You would click on Add Manufacturer. You would start typing. We don't have a product yet, but you'd start typing the product that you created. the manufacturer date. You can give it a unique code for that manufacturer, which I like to do. How many am I going to make? And then once you enter that in, it is going to show you the list of materials you will be making. This is your recipe. This is your batch list. And then you hit save when you're done. That batch is then made. Those products show up in your product tab as available to sell. And then when you sell them, they are deducted out of your inventory from the orders page. So that is how all these tabs work together. I will walk you through workflows that I use in a real life situation in future videos, but that is an explanation of all those main tabs and how they work. The last tab we're going to talk about real quick is reports. And the reports section is broken down into general administrative reports, materials reports. So you can track, do I need to reorder my materials? You can even set alerts on materials when they reach a certain threshold that you need to reorder. So it will alert you that you're low on something. You can do stock taking worksheets. You can check your material adjustments. So at the end of the year, you do a final count of inventory and find out that you're a little bit off of what Craftybase says. That's very common when you're manufacturing, just because not everything is exactly precise. A recipe might tell you you need 7.1 ounces and you end up using 7.12 ounces, things like that. There's also shrink and wastage and expiration, things like that. So that's what adjustments would be for. And the material adjustment summary can give you a summary, a report of those adjustments. There's a product section, same thing as materials. There's inventory worksheets, there's adjustment worksheets. You can see your top revenue generators, most popular products, and so on. Same thing with a lot of reports for orders, your order summary, your orders by product, orders by channel, order margin, order category, and so on. And then there's expenses, manufacturers, and customer reports. But at the very top, I skipped over this very quickly, but there's a sales and expenditure report, a profit and loss report, and your Schedule C guidance report. This is why many people do try to use Craftybase as an entire accounting solution. And in many cases, if you have a very simplistic business, you really can. But these are the reports that most people would run and provide their bookkeeper or accountant at the end of the year. And then they will move that information into your actual accounting books. But it's really nice that this system will show you your profit and loss, but most importantly, your Schedule C. And your Schedule C guidance is really what's going to help you with your cost of goods sold. And that cost of goods sold is going to automatically fill in this information based off of all the materials you used and the products you made and the products that you sold through your orders. Very, very powerful tool here. I cannot foresee myself not using something like this going forward. So that wraps up a highlighted overview of the features that Craftybase offers, how it can help you, why I think it's so important, and a little glimpse behind the curtains. Now I know that this is a very, very basic account and there's no information in it whatsoever, but that is intentional. The reason I'm starting with a clean slate is because, as I talked about, I'm going to be doing a huge video series on using Craftybase, and we're going to be walking through each of these together, creating everything on the fly and creating this massive kind of tutorial list where we've walked through everything together. I don't want to pre-fill anything for you. I want to do it all together. I think that'll be the best way to use this as a learning tool and for tutorials. And so we're going to be tackling this all together as time goes on. But with that being said, there's a couple more things I want to talk about real quick though, and that is on the right side there's a hotkey menu. So for whatever screen you're on, you can hover over this and there's a few things you can do just quickly for basically 1 or 2 clicks. Add an order, expense, product, and so on without having to necessarily navigate to the page. The last thing we're going to talk about inside the dashboard is this section right here, and this is your settings menu. We are going to talk about these in more detail as well in other videos, but as you can see here, you can manage your overall account settings, your subscription, of course. You can customize your invoices, which yes, Craftybase can generate actual physical invoices for you as well. What users have access to your account, and we're going to click on this for a second because as I talked about earlier, if you need to add a user like a bookkeeper to your account, this was where you could add them so they have access to get in, either make adjustments or see the information, run reports, completely up to you. And then you can see your sales channels. So if you have Shopify attached and Square attached, you'd be able to manage those here. Pricing tiers is if you have they default with retail and wholesale, but you can add a friends and family discount profile, You could have individual specific pricing tiers for different companies that you work with or different wholesalers, for example. Quantity types is unrelated to the materials, not important at this time. And then categories are all the different types of categories for your materials, your products, your expenses, your orders, things like that. You can manage each of those on each of those respective tabs, but this is just a one general place where you can see all your categories if you decide you want to delete some or merge some or anything like that. The last thing I want to do is jump back up here though to account settings. And because this is a getting started video, there's a few things I wanted to point out to you. First of all, you're going to choose your local country. You can use Craftybase with several different countries. However, if you're unsure of how well it would work for whatever country you work in, just reach out to support and they can give you the best advice on that. I'm in the United States, so I know it works great for the United States. I do know some that use it in Canada as well, so I know it works there. Outside of those two, I'm not really sure. You would just need to ask with support. What I really wanted to highlight here was the inventory start date. Now, I mentioned this earlier in the video. I'm going to discuss this a little bit after this screen share, that this is one of the most important steps you need to think about when you are starting Craftybase. And this is when you're planning to start your inventory. And that is, you have basically three options. You can start previously, which means you need to backdate everything, go back and fill everything in to whatever date that you want to start, for example, the beginning of the year. If you don't want to do that, or you don't have the documentation to be able to do that, you can start from today or whatever day, and then everything from this point forward gets put into Craftybase. Or you can even start putting in information now, knowing that you plan to start January 1st of next year. If you're going to go that route, definitely start putting information in now, because you want it to start tracking and accumulating all of that data ahead of time. But the reason to do something like that would be it's very late in the year. You already have most of your bookkeeping and accounting done, and you don't want to do anything major changes right before the end of the year. Otherwise, I would either backdate to the beginning of the year or start as soon as possible. But definitely work with a CPA or a bookkeeper accountant if you have any questions about how to do that, especially if you're coming from any other systems or from no system. If you've been tracking your expenses like a general business would with direct write-offs, but now you're going to start doing it the right way by using cost of goods sold, definitely work with someone if you need some assistance on how to start doing that. It's definitely important to choose the inventory start date. Obviously, this is not an accurate date, but you would want to put in the date you plan to start. You can set your default tax rate, which you would definitely want to do. This is your sales tax rate. And then you can track, tell it whether or not you track consignments. You can set a percentage of overhead to add into all of your pricing. You can set an internal labor rate. And then you can also decide how you want your notifications set up, as well as support. If you check the box for support, that allows Craftybase to be able to get in and look at your account if you reach out for them for any questions. Otherwise, I like to keep it checked off for security reasons. Not that I don't trust Craftybase, it's just best practice to always keep your account locked down. And then if you need them for support, you can turn it back on, just to allow them in. So that is a quick look at the different tabs and settings that you can configure. I know this was very high level and we didn't go into details of using each one of these tabs, because that is going to be pretty exhaustive. There are a lot of videos we can make. There's a lot of topics and subtopics we can cover. And like I said, I'm very excited to be doing this with Craftybase to not just help them out with tutorials, but help all of you, everyone in the same community as me, as handcrafters, of how I use Craftybase in my business, some tips and tricks, learning different processes and workflows. Definitely stay tuned for the future videos where we will be diving into a lot more detail in every aspect of Craftybase. I want to wrap up with some tips for you to getting started using Craftybase. Tip number one is to simply decide the best method to start using Craftybase. This is the most important question you need to ask yourself first before you move forward. You need to decide if you're going to backdate using Craftybase to earlier period in time, or if you want to start current date or start next year. And the next tip kind of goes without saying, and I just touched on it, and that is to make sure you're doing stock taking and stock counts on all of your finished products and your raw materials if you don't already do that. If you don't have any idea what your current stock is on your materials or your finished products, this would be a great time to do that, because you will want to put that information into Craftybase. This will all make a lot more sense after we start doing some other videos and tutorials and showing you how to use Craftybase for yourself. The next tip is to simply ask an accountant for guidance. If you have a bookkeeper, great. If you don't, then I would reach out to one for a consultation, let them know what you do, and ask them for guidance and advice on how to kind of get started. They will get you pointed in the right direction so you're not guessing from the very beginning, and you want to make sure you get started on the right track. Now, that tip isn't specific to using Craftybase or getting started with Craftybase or any accounting or bookkeeping or inventory software for that matter. That's really just a general tip. I think for anyone looking to start a business that this is kind of a new thing for you, or for changing systems, I would ask your accountant or bookkeeper for guidance. My next tip would be to plan things thoroughly. Yes, you can change the way you use Craftybase later. You can make some revisions, some corrections, some modifications, but it's going to be more difficult down the road if you do that because you might have to change some other things along with it. One change in a system like an inventory system can have a domino effect on other things. So the more time you spend up front and early on really planning everything out and thinking about how you want to build something out, you're going to save yourself a little bit of a headache later. My next tip is to simply consider using Craftybase as a supplement to whatever current accounting software you might be using. If you're using QuickBooks, Wave, Xero, something like that for your accounting solution, Craftybase doesn't need to replace it. You can use it to supplement. Craftybase gives you better insight into your operations than accounting software does. And then you can simply use that information, your cost of goods, for example, and your inventory value at the end of the year, and then transfer that information to your accounting software. That is how I do things myself, and that is how most businesses using Craftybase would handle that as well. Now, my next tip is to simply be consistent and stick with it. Like any system, what you get out of it depends on what you put in. The better information you give Craftybase, the better output you will get. Spend some time and definitely be diligent with your record keeping, your documentation, and make sure you're using Craftybase as an integral part of your business. If you treat it that way, the information that Craftybase will give you is invaluable. Well, I hope this overview video helps get you going or interested in using Craftybase. Remember that this is just the first of many, many videos coming about using the software. If you want to get started with it, use the link in the description below. And be sure to like this video and subscribe so that you don't miss on the future videos. Also, keep an eye out for other videos specifically on Craftybase and the playlist dedicated to using Craftybase as well. Thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you next time.